All right. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the American Academy of Emergency Medicine's Justice, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion section webinar, Out in EM, Navigating Residency Applications. My name is Maddie McDowell. My pronouns are she, her, and I will be moderating tonight's session. Tonight's session will be recorded and uploaded to the AAEM JEDI website within 24 hours. These sessions are meant to be interactive, so for our attendees, please use the chat function if you have any questions or comments. I'm leaving a little bit time, like at the end, like 15 minutes, so I'll check the chat section then. We can answer questions. Know that this is a safe space. It's all students, residents on the chat. We welcome and encourage your participation, and we hope to foster open, respectful dialogue. Before we do the Q&A, I'm going to do a very, very quick PowerPoint on important resources and tips for applications. So I'm just going to share my screen. All right. Can y'all see this? Perfect, thanks. All right. So once again, I'm Maddie McDowell. My pronouns are she, her. I'm bisexual, and I'm currently a fourth year at Midwestern University in Phoenix. Be graduating in 6 days and then doing residency at Indiana University. So we're going to do these quick topics. No pressure to take any notes. Like I said, this is going to be recorded. You could find it on AAM's website within 24 hours. So one really nice resource is diversity scholarships for your sub-Is. I know it's kind of like sub-I season now where you're doing all the applications. This is good because a lot of programs actually have funds for diversity. I've seen anywhere from like $500 to $2,500. I would recommend making sure that they include LGBTQ in their definition of diversity, but the majority of the ones I saw did. These funds could be used towards anything from housing, flights, meals. They don't really check what you use it for. So it's really nice to kind of subsidize how expensive away rotations can be. Some programs actually have mentorship opportunities. So one that I did with the scholarship is I was able to talk to a healthcare policy fellow at the program, since that's my interest. A good way to find some programs that have these scholarships is this link right here on EMRA's website. It doesn't list all of them, so if there's a specific place you kind of want to do your ways, check on the website just to make sure. Next, self-identifying as queer on ERAS. At the moment, there is no place specifically. There's no like checkbox where you can do it. I reached out to ERAS and they said they're actually going to consider this in the future, but that doesn't really help us for this current season. So to my knowledge, there are kind of 3 ways that you can self-identify. They don't all apply to everyone, but here are the options. First, using gender and pronouns. So for those who are non-binary, two-spirited, gender fluid, etc., you're able to put it in the personal information section. It offers like man, woman, another gender. And then through pronouns, you use they, them, or like other options. So this doesn't apply to everyone. So for me, as like a cis female who's bisexual, that didn't really help me self-identify. But for some people, it could. Next is through meaningful experiences. This is a really good way to do it. On ERAS, you're able to put 10 meaningful experiences and highlight 3 as the most meaningful. That means you get an extra like 250 characters to write why it's important to you. So ways where you can self-identify with this is by any queer organization you're in, any volunteering you do in the queer community, if you're involved with the GSA at your school, if you do research on these topics, you can put that in and mention in the description, like, as a member of the queer community, this is important to me, and that kind of lets them know that way. The next is in your personal statement. I recommend doing this if it applies to the general theme that you kind of wanted to do in your personal statement. So for example, this is kind of on mine. I wrote mine about my passion for healthcare policy and equity and how that inspired me to do emergency medicine. So just like the kind of gist of it, I wanted to, it was my goal to use my platform as a physician to work towards a more equitable field, pioneer gender and sexuality alliance at my school to create a safe place for fellow queer students. And my favorite part of my education was the tangible intersection between healthcare and social justice. So you can kind of directly say you're queer in that, But if you're writing yours about how like you were an ultrasound tech and you love ultrasound and that kind of contributed to your passion, that doesn't relate. So kind of make sure it fits in that. So like I said, unfortunately, those are the 3 ways for now that you can kind of self-identify through ERAS. Next, these are just very specific questions. So on ERAS, there is a place to put your gender identity. I reached out to ERAS to see what they recommend to do if you are trans or non-binary. Should you put the gender you identify with or the sex assigned at birth? They refuse to give an answer. They're only allowed to give more technical parts of applications, no actual guidance. They said recommending you talk to your dean. At least in our experience, deans don't always know the answer to these questions. So our recommendation for you is putting your identity that you identify with. And next, along the same line, should use your chosen name or your dead name. Once again, ERAS won't give an answer. We recommend using your legal name that is on your scores, your test scores, your transcripts, solely for technical reasons of like not making sure everything gets uploaded into your application. There's no confusion about who you are in the documents you have. You are able to enter your preferred name in ERAS as well. Next, very quick, just how to change your pronouns on Zoom. I'll speed through this and so you can like watch the video back later, but logging onto the website, hit your profile, there's a pronoun section over here, and then just double check that it changes there. So for a lot of interviews, they're done on Zoom. So that's how you can change the pronouns there. And finally, a really, really good resource that I'd recommend everyone uses. EMRA has a student resident mentorship program. What you do is you go on the website, you could sign up to be that you need a mentor. They go through like a whole sheet of things that are important to you, your interests, your identity, what you're kind of looking for in a resident mentor, and they match you up. I used it saying that I wanted a queer mentor in a specific location, and they matched me up with someone. And that's someone that can just give you personal advice, read your personal statement, any tips during the process. So really good resource. And I think that is my rapid fire PowerPoint. So I'll share the screen. All right. So now let's move on to the Q&A session. So let's go around and introduce our panelists. So if all you can do your name, pronouns, identity, if you feel comfortable disclosing that, your residency and what year you are in your residency, and then any interests you want to add. If Elaine would like to start.
Sure. Thank you so much, Maddie. I wish I had that PowerPoint when I applied. That is actually super helpful. My name's Elaine. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a graduating R4 at UCSF. I'm going to be doing social EM fellowship at Stanford next year, and then also working part-time in the community as well. Some of my interests are actually in LGBTQ health. I do like public health research and substance use work and language equity work as well. So super excited to continue my training in some ways, and super excited to be on this panel. Thank you. Do you want me to popcorn or have you pick the next person? Okay, how about Shin? I see you next.
Great, thank you. My name is Shen. I use she, her pronouns. I am a trans woman and about 2 years in transition. I started in medical school and came out actually on match day. I'm now at the Harvard affiliated emergency medicine residency and a PGY1 rising PGY2. In terms of interests, I still don't know where my career will lead me, but most likely I will be in an academic institution. I really enjoy teaching and education, and most likely will do some research regarding transgender experience in the emergency department, and also how we make medical decision makings. So that's me. We'll popcorn to Kelsey.
Hi everyone, my name's Kelsey. I use she, her pronouns and identify as bisexual. I'm an MS4, graduating MS4 at Arizona College of Osteopathic Medicine in Phoenix with Maddie. I'll be an intern at Creighton of Phoenix, or formerly Maricopa County, so staying in Arizona for EM residency. I really like social EM, I like medical education, those are kind of my interests, but luckily I have some time to figure it out and see where my career will lead me. We're happy you're all here and super excited to answer your questions. I'll popcorn to Kahim.
Hi, sorry, there's a bright light. I'm Keem. My pronouns are they, them. I am non-binary, I'm queer. I go to where do I go? Emory in Atlanta. I'm a PGY2. I guess I'm gonna be a PGY3 soon. And my interests are in admin, probably gonna do a QI. Fellowship in QI ops or admin.
Awesome. Well, I'm happy to have all you guys here. And once again, thanks for all the attendees for coming as well. I actually did not have the chat able to like type any questions that we could see. So if you have questions now, the chat is working. All right, so to start off the questions, first one is when it came to like finding programs to apply to, how did you go about finding queer-friendly programs?
Well, I actually didn't go about it in that way. Maybe that's not the right answer, but I kind of just looked for programs I liked and then having them be queer friendly or signify that they were queer friendly or in a queer friendly city or something like that was kind of a weighting decision making factor. But mostly it was about which residency program that I want to be in, what I want my training to be in. So perhaps you can go about it in that route. I happen to be at a place that I like the residency program, but I also like how queer friendly is and also like how queer friendly the city is and things like that. And kind of just all kind of worked out. But maybe somebody else here on the panel would have more experience specifically looking at queer friendly residencies.
And then Kelsey, and then Shin can answer after.
I think for me personally, I'm engaged and have a partner with stepkids. So being in Arizona was a big thing for me. So kind of, location and region was a big factor for me, and being able to rotate at the program I matched. I got to hang out with them, and there's a lot of queer residents at my program. So I knew that it was an environment that I would be accepted, my family would be accepted. But I think, applying to more programs, I looked a lot into their websites. Do they talk about DEI? Do they specifically talk about LGBTQ healthcare? Looking at their Instagram pages, their curriculum, do they talk about DEI efforts, things like that? So that's kind of how I tailored where I was applying. Outside of Arizona, I was pretty familiar with the Arizona programs just because regionally that's where I wanted to be. But for the programs I was less familiar with, I just really relied on social media, websites. On interview days, you kind of get a feel for it. And there were, certain queer residents I met on interview day that I would then reach out to after my interview and just kind of chat with them about the program, especially in certain places that maybe I would presume were less queer friendly. If they were in a city or a program or a state, then I would kind of reach out and just kind of pick their brains on how that city life and living situation is like as a queer resident there. So that was my experience.
Yeah, and I would say that I did some of the same things as well, talking to the residents, looking at the website for DEI, asking specifically in the interview whether they have support system for, I didn't say personally, I'm like people like me because they're like more things than to me that complicated my application, not only from the LGBTQ standpoint, but also I'm not a US citizen and need a visa, even though I graduated from US medical school. So all those things add together in the end, um, searching for a residency program that's crit friendly was maybe about the third most important things I was looking for in the which residency I should apply to. The one most important is that is getting the visa because otherwise I can't stay. And then there's the clinical training. The last one actually was crit friendly. Um, so yeah, I ended up at my current program because I rotated over there, and two, I know that both the APD, both the PD and one of the APDs are gay men. So, and they really put a lot of effort into DI efforts. So.
Right. And I agree with everyone. Definitely like stalking the Instagram helped me a lot too. Because the websites they aren't always the best on most information. A lot of Instagrams like they could post on Pride Day or have just like some show on there, I think was like a good representation from what I saw as well. Next question. Are there any green flags or red flags applicants should look for, whether it's, like I said, like applying or during the interview or during a ways that should kind of push them towards a program or like kind of be more hesitant, like with your identity? Elaine.
Um, I guess my answer might kind of be related to the last question, but green flags, I think if you see a lot of signs that programs are open and welcoming to LGBTQ applicants, that's important and that's awesome. Um, I think many of you probably have multiple identities that are important to you and multiple other things that you care about when you're applying to residency, probably to med school as well. Um, I would I would not discount places that put a lot of effort into DEI in general, especially if you like go on their Instagram, like Maddie and the others said, and like they're always like talking about how they're engaging with their community or they're trying to come up with a lot of recruiting events to showcase the range of like diversity in their programs and just like pay attention to what I guess like for lack of a better word counts as diversity to every program because it's not just about any one facet of your identities. Everyone is made up of so many different kinds of experiences and identities, and so something I really appreciated was just like meeting people from different programs who highlighted how like, oh yeah, like I'm like queer, but I also appreciate how my program makes accommodations for like some of my disabilities or some of my chronic illnesses um and like programs where residents don't necessarily feel super tokenized if they have certain identities that aren't as common or are kind of like either like underrepresented or not traditionally supported in medicine. I think it takes a lot of sleuthing, and sometimes it's super helpful to just reach out to residents specifically at a lot of programs and kind of like get the tea. I had some really interesting conversations with people on the interview trail where, I'd kind of like connect with someone and have a quick phone call. And sometimes what they would tell me on the phone, they would tell me some red flags that like weren't on the website or weren't on the interview day because on interview days people want to sell the program. Like I think all of us at our programs, like there's always going to be something that's not ideal or something that you will complain about. But on interview days, we want to kind of represent our program. We want to show our best. So sometimes it takes a little bit of a more private setting to get wind of some of like the red flags. And like some of the red flags might not even be related to being queer, trans, etc. It could be something completely different that you realize is also important to you. So really, really suss out like the whole package. And then a red flag for me on the interview trail was I would ask a lot of like PDs or APDs about diversity and changes in the program related to DEI. And if I ever got answers that were less than like excited or even like self-critical of their own program, like one PD said to me, like, "Oh, I don't see a problem. I don't feel like we need to do much more." That was a big red flag for me, and I was kind of surprised to hear that. But just ask the questions. Don't be shy. Especially once you get to the interview part of the application cycle, people pretty much want you. It's more about seeing if you're a good fit.
Kim?
Yes, I mostly looked at like demographic information, which I think might not be very helpful on a lot of websites. We just did a study that shows like most residency programs don't highlight their residency demographics. But there are kind of like, for example, two programs that did it really well and kind of just elucidated what they were kind of thinking about, what was important to them. For example, so like UChicago has a really good demographics page about who's queer and like what kind of queer and like who's trans or non-binary or cis. Like you don't really see that elsewhere. So it's the fact that they're even collecting that information means something to me anyways. And then like Hammer like did a really good job kind of illustrating their diversity in different forms, not necessarily queer identity or LGBTQI plus, but like just diversity in general with their like book thing that they would send out to you. So like kind of those types of signifiers were kind of very helpful. I mean, Emory doesn't do anything explicitly, but they're kind of a pioneer in DEI research. So that was already also a signifier of how friendly things were. So those are kind of the three things I looked for.
Hit it, Kelsey.
I think Elaine and Shin both kind of mentioned this in the chat and in their conversation, but I really just ask questions on interview day. It really is just as much, a two-way street. You want to get to know the programs as well. So every program I would ask them about their DEI efforts and just see how they talked about it. And you kind of just get a vibe, you get an idea of what they think about DEI and what they're like hoping to accomplish. Especially states like I applied quite a bit in Texas, states with like anti-LGBTQ like policies and laws and anti-DEI efforts, things like that. Those were the programs I specifically asked questions like how are you combating this when you have all these laws in place? And surprisingly, I got some really great answers from some of those programs. So although you kind of want to keep in mind like regionally where you're applying and is it a city or a state you'd want to live in. I think in a sense you can also try to be a little open-minded because some of those programs really surprise me with what they're doing, and despite some of the laws and the legal stuff going on, they're still doing a lot of DEI things. So I think kind of being open-minded, just asking the questions is really important, like Elaine talked about. There were also some red flags. Like I had conversations on interview day and where one program has no DEI efforts, and it was kind of like, oh, we're trying to find someone to start that up. And so that's a red flag for me. DEI is really important. If they don't have anything established and they're like struggling to find someone that's willing to take that project on as a faculty member, then that's a little bit of a red flag for me. I want to go to a program with faculty that values DEI as well. So I think, coming down to asking the important questions in interview day and not shying away from some of those hard conversations, because if it's important to you, you want to go to a place that values it as well.
Shin.
Yeah, Kelsey mentioned the location. I just want to highlight that a little bit. Application, I also didn't have a geographic preference within the US. So at every single residency program that I went to, I basically immediately after I got their interview invite, I selected a time and I went onto the website looking for what's the local law on LGBTQ issues. There is I forgot which website it was, but the graphics were all in shades of green. You probably know which website I'm talking about if you've ever been on it. But it gives a score for LGBT issues and then a score for trans issues. And I specifically looked at the trans issues because at the time of starting transition, I didn't want to just go to somewhere that will jeopardize all my effort and not able to change the gender marker on my driver's license, for example, and all those things. And I remember asking a program director about this. It's like your program's located in this state, which is not well known for being trans-friendly. What are your thoughts on a trans residence in your program? And the PD was very honest and basically said that, our hospital is very welcoming, our city is very welcoming. The laws, unfortunately, is terrible. Where you live is important to you, so take that all into effect of where you rank. And I thanked them for the answer, but honestly ranked the program pretty low because of that. So just want to highlight that where you go and where the local law is certainly has, I would say, even have more impact now than even before.
And just to build off that point a little, I'm from Florida, unfortunately, and there it's kind of any program that has DEI even mentioned in anything like on their website gets defunded. And obviously programs like to keep their funding, so they don't mention online. So I wouldn't like discredit these programs if it's like it does help to ask the question. Like if you want to be in a state like that, still apply because it just depends. When I did a rotation back home in Florida, I asked them like would this be a safe program for me? My passion is DI. That's how I kind of want to take my career. Would I not be able to do anything? They're like, no, we would fund you completely to go to like the state legislature and do all this advocacy. We would back you 100%. So even if it is in a state that might have some issues, you don't know if the program will be willing to support you and even fund you to do that passion. And that PD even said, like, there are still queer people in this state that need queer providers like you to take care of them. So, like, even though it might not be the ideal place you'd want to be, there are still queer people there that deserve care too. So I wouldn't discredit any of those places. Did anyone else have experiences like interviewing in like the South or regions like that where you're kind of like nervous or applied or didn't apply because of that? Keen.
So I'm actually from Texas, so like you said, maybe Florida, Texas, kind of all of these bands and things of the sort. And my home school is UT Southwestern, so I was very excited to stay. But yeah, I guess the being at a place or a city or a state that kind of confines you during your residency is different than being at a place that confines you during your attendantship or kind of like your actual practice. So maybe that can sway you one way or the other. That um maybe my prioritization was less about like um uh less permanent. Like wherever I was going to go for residency, it just felt less, it was felt like more transitory, and that um obviously I want to go to a program and support programs that have a lot of DEI efforts, but if the program itself was good, then that was less important because it like ends in 3 to 4 years. Like maybe for me as like a single person, not married, not having kids, like um didn't worry too much about those things. So it just really depends on how you look at things. If you're okay with just kind of living in a like a southern state like Texas or even Georgia or something like that for a little bit and being in a blue city, then it's better or tolerable, I guess, if you like the program so much. And then I guess the other thing is that um, you guys said like there are queer people everywhere, so somebody has to take care of them, and you can be a pioneer if you want to be a pioneer in the place that you're going. You can start at some place that doesn't have any diversity efforts and actually be the change. That's up to you as well. So maybe that's actually a calling card that you're like, oh, this place needs some structure and maybe I can give it, or some diversity, maybe I can be the person that like is the first person to do it. That's like kind of many different ways to look at it too.
All right. So next, did you guys disclose your queer identity in your applications? Or kind of like what was your thought process with it? Did you do it in your applications or during interview sub-I? Like when do you make that decision of disclosing or not disclosing? Yes.
So for me, I mean, it's all over my application. Maddie and I have done a lot at our school together, with DEI efforts. We, GSA, we were co-presidents of GSA together. So that was a big part of my application. And then we worked on DEI committees at our school. We've done stuff with AAEM. So it was pretty apparent on my application, that I was involved in LGBTQ healthcare. We've done like research, all the things. I don't know that I talked about my actually, I think I did mention my identity in my personal statement, kind of tying into some of the DEI efforts, because that was a big thing for me in my application. So I did mention my identity in my personal statement because it, like Maddie said, it kind of tied into what I was talking about. But also I think just asking questions on interview day, I talked about like my family, my fiance, having stepkids, things like that, and just trying to gauge how programs would feel about that, and if not only me as a queer person, but like my queer family, if we're going to be accepted into a program. So I wouldn't like force it on interview day, but through questions, I think that's how it would come up. And then along like auditioning, I did all my auditions in Arizona, so my family was here, and so if there were social events, my girlfriend at the time would come with me, so all the like residents got to meet her as well. So that was really important to me because it's kind of a package deal. I want to go to a place where she's welcome too, my family's welcome. So I was like pretty open about it during my audition process. But obviously it's a little tricky when you're traveling for auditions and maybe your partner or family isn't with you. It's a little trickier. For me, because it was all local, it was a little more natural to like incorporate her in the process. But that was just my experience.
Let's do Elaine and then Keen.
Yeah, I'll be brief. I was also pretty out. I think like maybe like 90% of my activities were queer. I wrote about my personal kind of like journey into LGBTQ health and how it related to my queer and other identities in my essays. And once you come out in your application, then people um, are more likely to ask about it, which honestly brought up a lot of good conversations at programs, because even though some programs might be queer friendly or have a lot of like LGBTQ representation, like um, my program is pretty queer. Our classes are now becoming like almost majority LGBTQ, which is great. However, um, that's not, to me, it was also important that I could further my interest in LGBTQ health. So I found that being out on my application and like wanting to ask programs like, can I pursue more of this work as a resident, and like what opportunities are there, and will I find mentors who are perhaps not only like LGBTQ but also not just like white, and who even like do work in DEI, like those. I feel like that was like the next step, and what I was really wanting to look for in places, and that was surprisingly not very common. But being out, I think a lot of people actually appreciated hearing more of a personal story. I will say I did self-select where I applied, and I applied primarily in places geographically where I would feel more comfortable with myself. And I think that was a little bit of a privilege in itself. So I can't speak to like applying in less accepting places. I did do a rotation in the Central Valley in California at Fresno, and the program itself was super queer friendly and really wanted to expand their DI efforts. But at the end of the day, I didn't want to live in that place and potentially feel like I needed to be more closeted in like the outside world beyond my program. So that became a factor when I was ranking And like part of it was also because I knew I was like going to be exiting a long-term relationship. So I was like, dating's gonna be kind of an issue. So that's like a whole other aspect.
I think I was next. A slightly different perspective is that I didn't, I mean, this aside from the way that I kind of represent myself, like as in like physically, I didn't have much queer kind of identifiers on my application other than my pronouns. I think that's probably also in a weird way a privilege because I have pronouns are they them. That's other people don't have that, and normally you're in the queer community already, so it's kind of it already gave it away, just like a little simple thing. I just put it next to my name on the application, and nowhere else in the application had anything queer. Like my personal statement was completely removed from that and stuff. So I guess the takeaway, oh, my battery's dying, I'm sorry. The takeaway from that is that like be as open and queer, sorry, or out or whatever as much as you want. Um, you can be very bold with it or but if you're not, like you didn't do a lot of queer stuff as a medical student, just cause like you just like other things, like I had other focuses, it still will you can still identify like in a shorter way or like a more kind of subtle, there we go, subtle way, and then through the conversations in your interview and where you select like have more luck kind of being more out, I guess, or more selective in that way. So you don't have to be like very queer and boldly loud on your application for it to stand out, for example.
I also did kind of what Fahim did, not out of a strategic planning of, hey, this is when I'm gonna tell them that I'm gonna be out with you and ask you all of these questions about trans and um, surprised is a question that you did not anticipate me asking. I'm just kidding, but I did wanted to not I did want to come out to the programs at a time that I felt more comfortable with instead of like just seeing it in the application itself. This also ties into like what the application was and where I was in my transition process. Like I only started in May of 2022, and of course, application was in September, and the interview season was right afterwards. So it wasn't too much of time, and the most important part for me actually was to make sure my old pronouns and my old name didn't show up in the application itself because my all my previous medical school stuff was still bear my old name and old pronoun. That was more important of me not being accidentally outed from that perspective.
Thanks for sharing all your guys' experience with it. I'd like to point out that it is also a privilege to be able to choose if you can disclose it. I know this question doesn't apply to everyone. You might be more outwardly queer. I acknowledge like people like me, you might not look at me and think I'm queer. I'm very straight passing. So it is a privilege to be able to like choose when you could come out. Um, so just like, what's my point here? Just know you're going to be at this place for 3 to 4 years. So like, not that you have to like disclose, but make sure that they are comfortable with queer people. You don't have to like out yourself in the process, but make sure in your place where you're safe. I think that is just the priority. If you like have a choice to come out or like it's more like outwardly your identity, your safety is the most important thing when it comes to applying and like making those decisions. All right. Okay, last question for me before we go to like the chat. Is there anything you wish you knew back when you were applying or things that you do different or just like advice for people going through it now? Kelsey.
I think just like I said it before, but like ask the difficult questions. I know my first few interviews, I was like very nervous to ask those questions. And I think just like the first audition, it took me a little bit to like get comfortable talking about myself and my life and on those personal notes. But I knew going in that DEI was really important to me. I knew that being at a program that accepted me and my family was important. And so I, mustered up the courage to have those hard conversations. And sometimes it's can be awkward if, a PD or APD doesn't answer it very well, or they don't value it as much. So you kind of can get into some like awkward situations, but I think it's really, if it's important to you, I mean, you're all here for a reason because you want to hear about this. And our identities are important. And like Maddie said, it is like 3 to 4 years of your life. And so I think it's important to be at a place and with people that like truly see you for who you are, accept you for who you are. So I think my advice is just like, don't be afraid to ask the difficult questions. I think there was like one program I interviewed with that it was a little bit awkward. But otherwise everyone is like very open to talking about DEI stuff. I never like felt uncomfortable talking about my identity on the interview trail or in auditions. So I think although it can be a little bit nerve-wracking, I think that's my advice is just like be open, be yourself, ask those questions because it really is important.
Elaine.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that too. I would say I feel pretty optimistic about EM as a field to apply to as someone who is part of the LGBTQ community. I think more and more places are hopefully starting to recognize the value in increasing the diversity of our EM workforce. And unlike some specialties, I think many, if not most programs are probably excited to meet LGBTQ applicants. I think when I went into the application process, I was pretty biased against not against, I was pretty biased in that I felt like I was a little bit more of an academic applicant. And I had a slight bias against some peer community programs. And part of that was because I had this bias that oh, academic places are more likely to be queer friendly. And I think that is false. I have been very pleasantly surprised. I mean, now that my whole class is graduating and finding jobs, just seeing how much quality improvement and diversity initiatives a lot of hospitals have, for their patients or even for their provider well-being, just to keep kind of an open mind with programs across the country, can be really helpful. And I think someone asked a question in the chat about maybe more rural or community EM programs. I would still ask those DEI questions because you never know if you're going to meet someone at that place who is super excited to bring in more people who care about the same things and make their place better. And they'll tell you all about what's going on at their program that you might not be able to see on their website. I think it was brought up before, residency websites sometimes really suck. Our program's residency website is so awful. All of us complain about it, and I'm not sure if it's really going to change. And I really think that talking to people can help dispel some biases or thoughts, or even change your mind about places. Some places look really good on paper, and then you interview there, or even just meet someone who's there, or hear in the grapevine that oh, maybe there's a little bit of a yellow or red flag that you didn't expect. So something I really enjoyed, honestly, when applying was just watching my mind change about so many places and just getting excited about all these places that I didn't really know much about. So I hope you all are very excited, whether or not you're applying this coming cycle. But every place has something pretty lovely to offer. And hopefully you find some pretty good fits for you.
I think a tip that I have is talk to people. other people applying that have gone on interviews, like at your schools of the class above you, like reach out to people that graduated from there. Because a lot of the time it's really hard to know in an interview because we're putting on our best face, but like so is the program. So talking to people that maybe have done a ways there, I've learned information about programs that I couldn't tell from interviews. Um, there's like the Reddit spreadsheet, like the name and shame. I go on there just because people talk. Like you can't take like grain of salt, but like in a process where we don't know much, we're just kind of going based off like a lot of faith in the process. Any information is helpful. So talk to people, reach out to people. Um, your fellow classmates interviewing, reach out to them too, and just talk. Yeah. And another thing for me, like I was careful about like self-selecting where I applied. I made sure all of them had very strong DI programs because my priority was not location. I applied all over the country. I wanted DEI. So if that's like you, like looking up, like Indiana had a queer EM page, and that's how they got on my radar, and that's where I'm going. So doing that and not being scared to like list how queer you are. My entire application is just like gay. So I knew people like chose me for an interview. They were okay with that. So I think those would be kind of my tips for it. Okay, let's look at some questions. As a trans non-binary person, what are questions that I should ask during interviews to get a better understanding of whether a program is queer friendly or not?
Um, I don't think any question was really elucidative of how friendly they were going to be to non-binary or trans people. Um, I think that part came from whether I was going to trust the people I was going to end up with to be a good ally, which I think is difficult, but sometimes you just get the vibe that people are good people and they'll like kind of change your mind or adapt or take the little inconvenience or whatever that you feel about pronouns or learning about different identities. I think that was actually the most important part, kind of just getting to know the people there in some way or the other via kind of what are they called, like interview dinners or whatever it was, something else other than the interview. Getting the vibe that they were gonna try. Because I think, I mean, I'm only 2 years out of medical school, but I think at that time there was not that many non-binary or trans people. I saw a few, a couple, like a handful, you know. So it was kind of hard to gauge, really. Most programs haven't really encountered anybody or apply like interviewed anybody in that realm, or sorry, that identify as such. So I don't know if a question would have like been satisfactory. Like what could have really convinced me, you know? But other than this person seems cool, and I think we're gonna be friends. And if we're friends, they would respect, you know, who I am. That type of thing, which is difficult, but I don't think one question is gonna be enough to kind of capture that.
Yeah, I completely agree as well. And um, the thought I had is also that the program leadership, the hospital and the city doesn't necessarily translate to who you're going to interact with on a daily basis and what those interactions are going to feel like, because I feel like a lot of the minority stress would stem from those interactions and what you experience directly, and in turn, what you'll internalize about those interactions. So all is to say that, you know, if you find um, the hospital, the PD, and the website all being great, still worth talking to the residents, still worth um, if you have the chance to know rotation over there and see how they actually interacted. I specifically remember like two different institutions. One I didn't apply to, not because of not being friendly to LGBTQ, but more because of visa. But I just witnessed both the residents and the attending just don't know how to present a patient that includes their gender identity. And it was someone who's like clearly out in the disease process actually um, make sure the disease process actually requires you to take a organ inventory. So like watching through the residents and attending trying to struggle with our language is like, okay, yeah, there's some work to be done here. Even though the hospital is pretty well known for being an accepting place, versus some other institutions like, yep, they have no problems doing that. So that is to say, daily interactions with your co-residents, with your attendings, with your other staff in numerous departments, they all make a difference in whether that place is queer-friendly or not, and there's no one single question that you can ask during a short interview that can elucidate that.
And then Elaine, and then Keith.
Oh, I just wanted to add one thing that maybe is a little more broadly applicable. I think if any of you are considering like accessing gender affirming care during residency, I think that is actually a very important question to ask about insurance and what insurance is offered and like what it will cover. It will vary by program. It'll vary depending on the insurance carrier, or depending on like the city, the state, etc. But that is like a perfectly appropriate question to ask. Granted, you know, depending on the questions you ask, it may, even if you're not trying to out yourself, it may implicate certain things, right? So if you're not comfortable with asking like one of the leadership, if there's any way you can find like a resident to talk privately to, that can be really helpful. And along those lines, like the other thing that I didn't really think about asking and isn't really personally important to me, but is important to a lot of my other queer colleagues is like fertility benefits. Because so I'm at UCSF, we have Anthem Insurance, Blue Cross California, and we access like fertility benefits through this like company called Carrot. The TLDR is that for a while, the queer women, especially in our program, found out that Carrot would not cover IVF for people who were like sexual minority women and cis women specifically because it was considered elective for gay people. And that was pretty absurd. And so luckily we have a union and it got kind of like brought up and now they are kind of like changing it so that queer people can get the same benefits as straight people. So that's something that, you know, if it is important to you, depending on people who are like trying to start a family or want to access gender affirming care or other, you know, LGBTQ health access for yourself, I would just ask, and like not everyone will know the answer, but at least ask so someone can get that information back to you.
Those are solid points that I did not think about at all. This is a high yield information if you care about that stuff. I do not, but it has been very beneficial for all of my friends who are in medical school who are freezing their eggs. I don't know. It's like a thing at this age and it's free, which is really cool. Anyways, my add-on was about the allyship thing. Um, was that I remember very distinctly at Emory. This is not a plug for Emory, but I remember someone thanking me for using my pronouns. They were like, it was very weird. They were like, oh, I think it's really brave. I was like, okay, that's cool. Nobody's ever even acknowledged it. And they were like, oh, I think it's brave. And then I was like, oh no, it's whatever. And they're like, no, no, actually, you know, it's really a big deal. And we're like, thank you. And I was like, so anyways, sometimes people just are good people. And hopefully you find those good people and wherever you go.
All right. And then our last question. I know we talked about it a little bit, but for less competitive applicants like international applicants, how do you balance the potential benefit of disclosing a queer identity in ERAS to academic programs where like DI is a priority, but they're more competitive versus like viable candidates for less DI focused rural community health programs? So I guess like academic are typically like more DI friendly, but they're like competitive versus like rural communities sometimes aren't as competitive, but less DI focus. So like how do you weigh which you should apply to, I think is a question. Kelsey.
I think it really is, in a sense, like up to you and your personal journey and what's important to you in residency. I mean, if being at a program that like fully accepts you for who your identity is, then I feel like it's important to disclose that. And I also think we've kind of talked, like people have mentioned it in this tonight, but just be open-minded. I know maybe you think academic is more queer friendly, but you'd be surprised. There's a lot of community programs, county programs. I'm going to a county program that's very queer friendly. So I think just be open-minded that maybe there are some community and rural programs that are more queer friendly as well. So I don't think, you know, it's quite as black and white as that. But I mean, I'm not an international graduate, so I can't really speak to that very much, but I think it really, my answer, I guess, is that it depends on how important it is to you, finding a program that really accepts you as who you are, and just to kind of be more open-minded that maybe there are some rural programs that are really queer friendly. And so that doesn't necessarily, you know, if academic versus community versus rural, those sorts of things might not really speak to how accepting they are. So you just kind of have to feel that out through talking to the residents and interviews and things like that.
Team.
Sorry, I actually don't think my hand was up for this question. My bad.
Okay, no worries. All right, well, I think we can end it there. Thank you so much to all our panelists. You guys are amazing, and thanks for everyone that came. I'm gonna drop the link to like the JEDI website. Like shameless plug, we have a LGBTQ work group that Elaine, Kelsey, and I are all in. We do really cool projects, write papers, make webinars like this. I'm also going to drop my email address. So if anyone has any questions or wants any mentorship, you can feel free to reach out to me. And any of the panelists also want to provide their information if they want to. But thank you all for coming. And then the panelists can stay on for a hot second just to unpack. That would be great. Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much for hosting.
All right. How did it go?
That was awesome. I feel like that was
Yeah,
so
that was so organized. Good job.
Very smooth.
You should do this as a part-time gig.
Really?
Yeah.
No. My heart rate was like 115 for the first 5 minutes.
Oh, really?
That's not healthy.
Couldn't tell at all. So
Can we
did
prescribe
great.
you some Atopic?
Everyone did great.
Awesome. Okay, any comments, questions, concerns, or?
You know,
Awesome.
one thing not a concern, something I really appreciate is I feel like everyone on this call had like different experiences or backgrounds. Um, Sometimes like on panels or events or something, like at our program, sometimes like we don't have any like international like people who need visas and like or like people who necessarily are like trying to start families or already have families. So I think that was a really nice. I'm just really happy that I got to meet you all and do this panel together because I think it helps some of the attendees.
Yeah, it was a great group.
Yeah. Aw. Well, thank you all for coming. Stay in touch. Yeah. Small community, well, actually, like a bigger community now, but like it is always so nice seeing like other queer people in medicine because it isn't always like very outward, and I don't know.
Yeah,
Nice have.
yeah. Hopefully we get to see each other at some conferences and hang out.
That'd be awesome.
Yes.
Yeah.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
For
Thanks for
Jeff, trying to do that, right? We're trying to have like a queer mixer for next scientific assembly. So that'd be cool.
awesome. Yeah, thanks. I agree with Elaine. It's a very diverse group.
Yeah.
You all.
Okay. Well, have a good night, everyone.
See
Have a
ya.
good night. Bye.